In the annals of modern aviation, certain silhouettes demand our utmost reverence. Before you stands a leviathan of the skies, the mighty Hughes H-4 Hercules. A staggering proposition born of wartime necessity, designed to bypass the menace of ocean submarines. Look closely at the men dwarfed by its prow. This is an ocean liner granted the gift of flight.
He was one of the richest men. He owned a studio. The girls were flocking to him.
He was eccentric, there's no question about it. He wasn't crazy.
He may have been strange in that he had so damn much money.
He probably made the greatest aviation picture ever made, Hell's Angels.
Planes and the aviation industry were his first love.
Oh, he loved machines more than he did people, really.
Hughes was a man who lived on his ability to get along because they would make exceptions for him.
He was wealthy and he was powerful and he had cash.
And he'd say, well, just remember, Bob, there's no one that I can't buy or destroy.
He was, for all intents and purposes, an inmate because he was a prisoner of his own fears.
He wanted me to be in constant touch with him. And I'd always say, I just spoke to the poorest man in the world.
Howard Hughes was born in Houston, Texas on Christmas Eve 1905. Amidst the thriving Texas oil industry, his father, abandoning his law practice, embraced the life of a wildcat. Initially struggling in the oil business, Hughes Sr. took odd jobs just to sustain the family. However, his fortunes changed when he acquired a wooden prototype of rock ear, an innovative oil drilling bit capable of penetrating thick rock layers, a common frustration for oilmen. After successful manufacturing and testing, Hughes Sr. partnered with another and established the Sharp Hughes Tool Company. Meanwhile, Howard's overprotective mother showered him with excessive attention while his father was busy with business affairs.
His mother was a very powerful influence on him. Partly, I think, as much as anybody, helped instill this sort of a lifelong phobia or fear, anyway, of germs.
At the age of 16, Howard was away at school when he learned that his mother had died during surgery. 2 years later, Howard's father died of a heart attack.
When that happened, Hughes began to exhibit all the traits that you would see throughout his life. That very strong-willed character, that tremendous streak of independence. Nobody's going to tell me what to do with my money or how to run my various enterprises. All of those things that really dominated him as an adult manifested themselves very quickly, much to the surprise and anger, by the way, of the other family members.
He was smart enough at age 19 to go before a judge in Houston, convince the judge that he was sophisticated enough to buy his uncle, who also had ownership in Hughes Tool, at which time he became the sole owner of Hughes Tool.
But he wanted control from day one, from the time he was 19, 20 years old, which was the one word, if you were going to describe the man from day one to the end, was control. He wanted to control everything.
Howard, now in charge, married socialite Ella Rice and embarked on a journey to Hollywood. Captivated by its allure, with the guidance of his uncle, screenwriter Rupert Hughes, he entered the film industry's elite circles. The couple settled into a luxurious Spanish-style residence on fashionable Murrayfield Road. Hollywood society embraced him, but secretly referred to him as the sucker with the money. Hughes delved deeper into the intricacies of making movies, devoting months to film sets to absorb technical knowledge. He would spend entire evenings dismantling film projectors, driven by an obsession to grasp every detail of the industry. Adopting a lifelong habit, Hughes abandoned wearing a watch, blurring the boundaries between day and night. During his waking hours, which knew no bounds, he toiled relentlessly for up to 40 hours without rest, pausing only for occasional sustenance like a can of beans or an avocado and bacon sandwich. Once acquainted with the chaotic sets, the volatile temperament of actors and directors, and the general disorder of filmmaking, Hughes resolved to take an active role. His initial project, Swell Hogan, proved to be a costly misstep. training $60,000 from his fortune. Despite pleas from his family and associates to abandon the film industry and preserve his wealth, Hughes remained undeterred. He promptly invested in the careers of actors and productions. The critics loved it, and profits from the film all that made up for his previous loss. At the age of 21, Hughes was a producer with a confirmed hit. As the spotlight shone on him, Hughes sought to relieve himself from the day-to-day business pressures by hiring Noah Dietrich as an advisor.
Dietrich came to work for him in the 1930s when, as dependent as Howard was on the tool company based in Houston, he felt he needed some liaison who would be able to look over the books and advise him as to how it was doing.
Noah took the business from that point, built it up to where at times it was earning between $50 and $55 million a year in those days.
Freed from these obligations, Hughes immersed himself in what truly fascinated him, the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. Establishing a film office, he secured the talents of director Louis Milestone under a 3-year contract. Their collaboration on 2 Arabian Nights catapulted then-unknown actors Louis Volheim and William Boyd to stardom, and earned Hughes his inaugural Academy Award in 1927. Unable to find a director who shared his passion for aviation, Hughes took matters into his own hands. He wrote, produced, and directed Hell's Angels, an epic depicting 2 British flyers vying for affections of an English socialite. Meanwhile, Hughes' own wife, Ella, reached her breaking point and filed for divorce, citing abandonment and cruelty. For the production of Hell's Angels, Hughes mobilized a considerable portion of Hollywood. He amassed a fleet of World War I fighter planes, hiring every available pilot in the industry. His obsession extended to cloud formations, often delaying expensive production schedules until the atmospheric conditions were perfect. Amidst these changes, Hughes, an accomplished pilot himself, impulsively took to the skies in a small scat plane he had never flown before. To the horror of the pilots and stuntmen, the plane went into a tailspin and crashed. Hughes emerged from the plane unscathed, prompting crew members to jest that at least he hadn't harmed his check-writing arm. Despite his narrow escape, Hughes feared better than others involved in the production, as 2 pilots tragically lost their lives during filming. By the time Hughes completed Hell's Angels, the public's fascination had shifted toward talkie pictures, leaving him disheartened. He envisioned his film as the pinnacle of cinematic ethics, but realized its potential was limited without a synchronized soundtrack. Ignoring the advice of business advisors, Hughes commissioned a new script and embarked on reshooting dialogue scenes. Greta Neeson, with her thick Norwegian accent, lost her role, replaced by Harleen Carpenter, a bit player in Laurel and Hardy comedies, who Hughes transformed into Jean Harlow, the iconic platinum blonde bombshell.
Would you be shocked if I put on something more comfortable?
I'll try to survive.
After a staggering investment of $4 million, Hell's Angels premiered in grand fashion at Grauman's Chinese Theater.
Looking at Hollywood Boulevard, illuminated for miles in honor of the opening of Hell's Angels. For the first time in history, Vine Street and Hollywood Boulevard have been made into one-way streets for 2 miles through the heart of Hollywood to facilitate the handling of the traffic, bringing the throngs to this elaborate opening.
While the film shattered box office records, Hughes privately acknowledged that undertaking such a colossal project solo was one of his greatest misjudgments. But that didn't stop him from trying to cash in on the success of Hell's Angels. He released 2 quickly produced aviation pictures, Coq Aviator and Sky Devils. Both were complete failures. Another disappointment followed with Age for Love, mirroring Hughes' tumultuous relationship with its leading lady, Billy Dove.
Howard was very much in love with Billy Dove, who, in silent pictures, was the most beautiful woman on the screen.
But they had a falling out, and I never forgot. Howard told me that he loaded all the furniture up there from Billy's house, took it in the middle of a desolate block, strangely enough, right on Wilshire Boulevard, and set fire to the whole damn thing. Burned up the van and furniture and all. Be amazed. You wouldn't be able to do that today anywhere, I guess. But at that time, he did what he wanted.
Amidst the turmoil, newsreels across the nation sensationalized tales of infamous criminals like Pretty Boy Floyd and John Dillinger. Hughes, sensing the public's fascination with gangsters, seized upon the opportunity and selected Scarface as his next venture, loosely inspired by the life of Al Capone. Taking the more hands-off approach this time, Hughes entrusted Howard Hughes with the directional duties. Hughes cast Paul Mooney and George Raft in the lead roles. The film, characterized by its depiction of graphic violence, lust, rape, and subtle suggestions of incest, courted controversy. The self-censoring Hays office condemned the movie, demanding a new title and altered ending. Contrary to expectations, Hughes took a defiant stance and sued the Hays office, ultimately securing the right to exhibit Scarface in its original form.
He had a reputation for fighting the censors. Was he a great champion of First Amendment rights? And the answer to that is no, but he saw fighting the censors as a wonderful way to drum up mercantile interest in his movies.
While Hughes maintained his interest in filmmaking, he briefly retreated from the industry, redirecting his focus towards his beloved hobby of flying. Hughes and his Hollywood companions frequently graced the skies above Southern California.
Noah Dietrich used to say, you go flying around with Howard, he goes out there and he picks any airplane that's on the damn landing strip and takes off from it, and you're going to wind up getting killed. But Howard never got killed, nor did we.
With Hughes himself often disappearing for days, navigating his Belling pursuit plane between California and Palm Springs. In 1934, Hughes showcased his aviation prowess by entering the Boeing in an air meet in Miami, effortlessly clinching victory with an impressive average speed of 185 miles an hour. This triumph ignited Hughes' passion for aviation, leading him to devote himself entirely to the field. Under the alias Charles Howard, Hughes worked as an assistant pilot for American Airlines, earning $250 a month while absorbing the intricacies of flight.
He loved to fly airplanes, loved everything about airplanes, loved the gauges in airplanes, loved to talk to pilots. The whole process, he was absorbed by it.
After just 2 months, Hughes departed from American Airlines and, alongside mechanic Glenn Oderkirk, established the Hughes Aircraft Company. Together, they embarked on the ambitious endeavor of crafting the world's fastest racer, the H-1.
That particular plane was one that he was instrumental in helping to design. But the heart of the way he designed airplanes was, he was a great brain picker. He would cull ideas from a whole range of things, weigh them, decide which ones might work, bounce them off other people. The H-1 was a perfect example of that. Outstanding, very swift, extremely modern-looking plane for its time.
On August 18, 1935, Hughes piloted the H-1 to set a remarkable land speed record of 352 miles an hour.
As ship is raised from runway and wings into the air, wraps are coming off craft that has long been called the mystery plane. And then the mystery unfolds as its owner, backer, builder, and pilot, Howard Hughes, brings the plane in from its test flight for a landing at the dangerous speed of 75 miles an hour. It's only 1935. Yet millionaire sportsman Howard Hughes has flown over 300 miles an hour.
Capturing the public's imagination as a dashing aviator, in recognition of his extraordinary contributions to aviation, Hughes was awarded the prestigious Harmon Trophy in 1937. In a White House ceremony, President Roosevelt presented Hughes with the trophy, saying he hoped someday they could fly together. In 1938, Hughes embarked on what would become one of his most remarkable feats, a flight around the world.
If I've seemed to be in too much of a hurry to wait and pose for your pictures, it's not because I'm high-hat or anything like that, but just because I've been terribly worried that I wouldn't get out of here before the weather changed. I had a good break in the weather yesterday, and I've lost that, and I suppose it'll be fair today, but I've been in an awful rush to get away from here, and I hope you'll forgive me.
Oh, you bet.
Amidst a crowd of onlookers, Hughes and a meticulously selected flight crew took off aboard their modified Lockheed 14, christened the New York World Fair. As a gesture of good fortune, Hughes dipped the wings over the home of his then-girlfriend, Katharine Hepburn.
Every conceivable kind of electronic gadget imaginable they packed onto that plane. The difference between that plane in 1938 and Lindbergh's Spirit of St. Louis across the water just slightly more than 10 years before that is like night and day. I mean, the Lockheed that they flew around the world in was a very sophisticated airplane for its time that showed that interest of his in technology and was a great contribution towards seeing the kinds of long distances that planes could tackle.
The flight commenced with a record-breaking landing from New York to Paris in a mere 16 hours and 38 minutes, with Hughes at the helm.
I certainly hope that the fine friendship which now exists between America and France will continue and be an example to the other countries of the world.
With Hughes piloting, the flight path traversed from Paris to Moscow, down to Serbia, captivating the world's attention as they awaited updates on the crew's progress. However, amidst the acclaim, not all news was favorable. Departing Serbia, Hughes narrowly averted a disaster by narrowly missing a collision with a mountain range, misidentified on the U.S. survey map. Upon his return to New York, Hughes was hailed as a hero, having circumnavigated the globe in an astonishing 3 days, 19 hours, and 7 minutes.
I know you're tired. Congratulations. Welcome home. That will be tired too. Goodbye. Is it true that you lost your antenna last night? What's an antenna?
Despite his reserved nature, Hughes endured 3 days of ticker-tape parades and receptions across New York, Chicago, Washington, and Houston. In 1940, Hughes redirected his aviation ventures towards a more pragmatic endeavor by acquiring a controlling stake in Trans World Airlines. His influence extended to conceptualizing the original design for the Lockheed Constellation.
He called us up one day and he said, I want to take a group to New York. It's the inaugural of the new plane that we've just done. It was named after my wife, Connie Moore. It was called the Constellation. So he said, will you put the group together at your house and then meet me at the Burbank Airport? And we're going to do it as a midnight flight. So I said, sure. Who do you want? I said, get every star in the business. But we had Paulette Goddard, and we had Lana Turner, Merrill Oberon, Cary Grant. Every star you could think of was in that thing. I never forgot that when I called Paulette Goddard, she said, tell Howard I'll do the trip, but I want 2 round-trip tickets to Rome. And I called Howard and I said, if you want Goddard, you got to give her 2 tickets to Rome. She says, oh, that bitch, give it to her. So she had 2 tickets to Rome. At any rate, as we got off the plane in New York, and there was a blizzard, there was a blowing 60-mile-an-hour tailwind, so we flew there in a little over 5 hours, which is fantastic for a prop ship at that time.
While Hughes remained preoccupied with flying friends across the country, the escalating war in Europe prompted the Defense Department to enlist Hughes Aircraft for the supply of aircraft components, artillery shells, and cannon barrels. Within the crowded Hughes Aircraft hangar, work was also underway on an all-wood long-range bomber dubbed the D-2. By 1942, Allied ships were being decimated by German U-boats. To address the threat, President Roosevelt turned to Henry J. Kaiser, a businessman turned shipbuilder with a track record of success during wartime.
And because he'd been so successful at that, the plan he proposed as much as anybody, and talked Hughes into it initially. Let's build these giant flying boats to ferry men and material across the seas. That's the way to get around the German U-boat menace. And Hughes always liked to challenge, said that sounds great.
In anticipation of securing a contract for flying boats, Hughes initiated testing of his amphibious Sikorsky S-43 on Nevada's Lake Mead. However, during one test, he was involved in a violent crash, making his 4th such incident. Despite Hughes escaping injury, tragically, 2 co-pilots lost their lives in the accident. Recognizing the importance of political connections, Hughes adeptly maneuvered within political circles. He directed his press agent, John Mayer, to host and entertain a group of visiting military officials, including President Roosevelt's influential son, Elliot, who played a role in military aircraft acquisition. Mayer facilitated tours of Hollywood and threw lavish parties, where aspiring starlets vied for attention of the esteemed guests. Those interactions, coupled with Hughes' influential Washington lobbyists, proved instrumental in securing an additional contract for 100 Hughes XF-11 reconnaissance aircraft, an extension for the earlier D-2 design. While Hughes was pleased with securing the contracts, the arduous task of designing and manufacturing the aircraft took a toll on him, leaving him mentally drained.
The flying boat is an astonishing achievement in some ways, but one of the most impractical things ever conceived. Building a plane of that size was an enormous undertaking to begin with, but building one out of wood, where you had to measure every particular piece for its density, versus a piece of metal where you know what that density will be, absolutely nightmarish kind of thing to undertake. And it helped as much as anything to push Hughes into his first major mental breakdown, which occurred in World War II, where he went off to the desert in Nevada for several months and just basically had to isolate himself from the calls, from the pressure, from the decisions that went into building that particular. And it's also one of the reasons it was not finished before the war was over.
Although World War II had ended, Hughes continued production on the flying boat and personally financed the completion of his XF-11. Many of Hughes' Hollywood friends looked on as he piloted the prototype XF-11. As in the past, Hughes insisted on personally testing his aircraft. The flight ended in tragedy as his plane lost a propeller and careened towards a residential section of Beverly Hills.
He could have saved himself. All he had to do was parachute out. But something went wrong with the plane, and he kind of fought with the plane trying to find out what was wrong with it, and then boom, all of a sudden it hit.
We were going to visit Dennis O'Keefe, who lived on the street about 2 blocks away from the country club. And as we got to Dennis's house, he said, "Christ, Howard's plane just took the top of our roof off the house and landed up in the country club, crashed." And I couldn't believe it. I drove over there, but Howard had been taken away already. He was really banged up.
Hughes was swiftly rushed to a Beverly Hills emergency room, where doctors delivered a grim diagnosis. He was in shock, suffering from severe burns, broken bones, and extensive internal injuries, including a crushed torso that displaced his heart to one side of his chest cavity.
It's not entirely clear exactly how it affected him physically from then on out, but it has always been assumed that some of his attachment to codeine, which turned out to be a lifelong addiction, stemmed from that time.
Despite the severity of his injuries, Hughes miraculously survived and displayed promising signs of recovery during his hospitalization.
While he was in the hospital and he began to feel better, they didn't have automatic beds. And Howard designed the automatic bed in the hospital where you can raise the feet or the head or the middle of it. Whatever the hell you want to do, the controls are at the beds, and all the hospitals have those beds now, and Howard designed that bed.
Exactly 1 year after the harrowing crash, fully recuperated, Hughes bravely took to the skies again in the rebuilt XF-11. However, the government's response was less than enthusiastic, as it announced an investigation into Hughes' activity as a defense contractor.
Mr. Hughes, the papers say that you're going back to Washington. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm going there to testify before Senator Brewster's War Investigating Committee. As you know, the committee has caused quite a stir by its investigation of my 2 airplane projects, the XF-11 photographic plane and my large flying boat.
$40 million has been paid by the government to the Hughes Aviation Company, and nothing has been thus far received. What became of the $40 million is what we want to know.
So I ask you this question again, Senator Brewster. During my last trip to Washington, and while we were having lunch in your suite at the Mayflower Hotel, did you or did you not offer to call off this entire investigation if I would agree to merge TWA, Trans World Airlines, with your friend Juan Tripp's Pan American Airways?
The hearings commenced on July 28, 1947, in the caucus room of the Senate office building, with Hughes press agent John Mayer taking the stand first. Mayer faced questioning regarding Hughes's alleged preferential treatment of government officials, including the extravagant expenditure of $5,000 on alcohol, food, and entertainment for Elliott Roosevelt and his associates.
The girls were very pleasant.
What has that got to do with aircraft production?
They just went along. Every company in the business did it. We're no different.
Well, but is it, you say because she was very charming, that's the reason that you charged up $132.
That's right.
For the which would go into the production of airplanes.
That's right.
And now, will you tell us why you gave her $20 and charged it up to the company to go home if she was very charming?
Well, you tapped me. Listen. Very good. Point one.
Hughes himself was the final witness to testify, displaying evident disdain for his accusers throughout the proceedings.
Now, will you give me the questions in advance that you want to ask me while I am here? Or will you give them to any third neutral party? Is it not true that you are going to propound the questions for me as I testify and based upon what I testify as I go along? Are you willing to set aside the questions in advance which you will ask me?
Mr. Hughes.
When John Mayer failed to appear on August 8th, the committee became enraged.
Allow Mr. Hughes, I'm asking you what your answer was. And we're not going to have this bickering back and forth. You are before this committee, and you're going to answer the question.
You asked me just now about a reply that I made. My answer is I don't remember. Now, the man is taking it down there. Let's ask him. What?
Will you bring Mr. Mars in at the 2 o'clock session?
No, I don't think I will.
Will you try to bring him in?
Oh, I don't think I'll try.
All right.
Throughout the hearings, Hughes stood his ground, but the final straw came when questioning turned to the flying boat project.
I've put the sweat of my life into this thing. I have my reputation rolled up in it, and I have stated several times that if it's a failure, I'll probably leave this country and never come back, and I mean it.
Overall, the committee had made a disastrous misjudgment. They sought to prove that Hughes had profited from his wartime contract, when in reality, he had poured millions of his own dollars into the project. During a recess in the hearings, Hughes orchestrated the monumental task of relocating large sections of the flying boat from Culver City to Long Beach Harbor, incurring a significant cost of $50,000. Technical crews labored tirelessly, assembling the components day and night, while speculations ran rife in newspapers that Hughes might attempt to fly the craft before the hearings resumed. Demonstrating a stroke of public relations brilliance, Hughes orchestrated an event where newsreel cameras captured him leading senators on an inspection of the flying boat.
I think the United States owes a great debt of gratitude to Mr. Howard Hughes for conceiving and for constructing this great plane. It's one of the most valuable contributions to aeronautical science, I believe, which has ever been made, and will be of inestimable value not only to aviation, but I believe eventually to the country's security.
On November 2nd, 1947, amidst a crowd of thousands of spectators, Hughes confidently taxied the 60-ton craft into Long Beach Harbor.
The air giant starts to move, driven by her 8 3,000-horsepower motors. And now for Mr. Hughes' surprise. As the enormous craft approaches her 95-mile-an-hour takeoff speed, the pilot lifts her onto the step and holds her there as she races through the choppy sea. And with the final drive of her engines, 200 tons are airborne. 5 months ahead of time, 70 feet off the water, she stays for a mile. $23 million worth of airplane has answered a lot of committee questions. It can fly.
His triumphant display showcased the merit of his prized flying boat and effectively brought the Brewster hearings to a swift conclusion.
When Senator Brewster realized that he was fighting a battle against public opinion, a losing battle, he folded up and took a run-out powder. Yes, that was the tip-off. When Senator Brewster hit the road for the backwoods of Maine, that meant the hearing was over. Washington was too hot for him. He couldn't take it. After that, the other senators in this committee saw no reason why they should fight Brewster's losing battle for him if he was too cowardly to remain and face the music.
I saw what Hughes did to Brewster during the hearing, and he helped choose a candidate to run against Brewster, gave financial assistance, and he defeated Brewster. And the last time I saw Owen Brewster, he was in the halls of the Senate begging for a $10,000 a year job, which he could not get.
Back in Hollywood, Hughes carefully crafted his image as a Hollywood playboy. As one starlet astutely observed, Hughes could have had any physical imperfection, but his wealth made him irresistible.
Along with the notion that he made a lot of money, that he had a Midas touch, that he was an aviation genius, that he was a financial whiz, that he was a great movie maker. He also liked to add to that list of superlatives the fact he was a great ladies' man.
Hollywood gossip columns frequently featured Hughes, linking him romantically to numerous glamorous starlets.
He's a bachelor, very much available, and he courted every girl in the whole damn town.
At one time, I'm sure he is dated, which is a kind of a kind word for it, all the girls on the 20th Century Fox contract list. Yeah, Howard, he had them gone, boy.
Howard was never a wallflower, but he didn't mingle too much either.
Yes, he was very shy around women, but he had more women than anyone. I think he had more women than Errol Flynn.
And of course, he had no trouble having dates because everyone knew who he was and everyone liked him. He used to love to go out and he'd dance. He was a good dancer. He was a good rhythm.
That guy could jitterbug, Latin dance, anything. He was fantastic. I was at the Coconut Grove one night with Howard Hughes and Marilyn Monroe. I saw him and Marilyn out there jitterbugging like crazy. Marilyn and I were drinking Dom Perignon, Howard was drinking Poland water.
What he did do with a lot of the girls, including Ginger Rogers, he'd have a whole tray of jewelry, and I mean jewelry. Beautiful necklaces and brooches and rings. And now Mrs. Ginger turned him down. She wouldn't have any part of it because she was his girl for a while. And Catherine Grayson took it. She had that whole tray of jewelry, as I remember.
In fact, he offered Elizabeth Taylor $1 million tax-free if she would marry him. But Elizabeth, who was very young at the time, I think she's still in her teens, she turned him down. Very unromantic proposal.
Unfortunately, I saw one trait in Howard that I never liked, and I liked this man very much. But he always told every girl he ever went with that he was going to marry her. Why the hell he said that, I don't know.
He was going with Lana Turner, and Lana was madly in love with him. And she thought sure she was going to marry him. And she went and had all the towels and bed linens monogrammed HH. When Howard found out about it, he says, "Why don't you marry Huntington Hartford?" He was very much in love with Lena Darnell, and she was gorgeous. She told me they don't call it Hughes Tool Company for nothing.
Howard Hughes again turned a hobby into an industry when he purchased RKO Studios in May of 1948.
if he wanted to spend $22 million to buy RKO. Whether RKO was a success or not didn't make much difference, because the following year, Hughes Tool would spit out another 50 or 55 million.
That was the company that year in and year out churned out the profits and made it possible for him to invest in all of these other things.
Even though he bought the studio and put some good people in there running it, he never saw the studio.
There used to be a legend that Howard Hughes went in the studio one night at midnight and said, "Paint it." Howard told me that wasn't true. He said the closest he ever got to RKO studio, he drove down Gower Street and he turned on an aide and says, "That studio needs a paint job." And the thing was painted the next day.
He used to office in a little one-room office at Golden Studio. He'd have a desk and 2 wooden chairs. But he was just exactly across the aisle from a projection room. And there he would sit every night and see the rushes that were done all day long of all the various pictures at RKO. And he would sit there and pick out the scenes that he wanted put in, the scenes he wanted cut.
The painting that I did, he just enjoyed very, very much. I think only once did he say to me, would you lower the décolletage a little bit, about a ½ inch here, and move it down to about a ¼ of an inch here, but never made any other comment than that. One evening he spent a ½ hour on the couch with me in Beverly Hills just discussing the thickness of a shirt. Now obviously the thickness of the shirt had to do with a garment that was, in this particular case, on Jane Russell. And he wanted me to understand very clearly how the thickness of the shirt would appear as it was against human flesh. But he was painstaking to make certain that I understood not the thickness of a pocket, not the thick. He would repeat it over and over again, and then would always ask, "You understand what I mean?" I would say, "Yes, Mr. Hughes, I do." And then he would go over it again, and when you left, it was impressed in your mind exactly what he had in mind to do.
Although Howard Hughes was now a powerful studio owner, he certainly didn't play the part.
He phoned me actually at the office possibly once during the years we were together. He'd like to phone people about 3 o'clock in the morning. And the reason for that is this. Mr. Hughes believed in something called natural sleep. And what did that mean? That meant that one kept awake until one grew tired. When one grew tired, one went to sleep. This could be 36 hours, it could be 3. It could be on the floor of his office, it could be in his bed. It didn't matter terribly. He liked the nights because it was very quiet. There was another reason for his liking the nights. He was growing hard of hearing, and the nights obviously a little more quiet than the daylight. He used to call me about 3, sometimes 4 in the morning, and the conversation usually began very politely as follows. "Sorry to disturb you, Bill." And I say, "I'm sorry also, Howard," my voice being thick with sleep. And he'd say, "You sure you're all right? It doesn't bother you?" And I said, thinking my contract, "Not a bit, not a bit." And then he would tell me a particular project that we would discuss, often on the phone for 20, 30 minutes. Always polite, always well-mannered, and always ended again with an apology for disturbing me.
Howard, when he'd work maybe 48 to 60 hours at a time, and then conk out. And he'd sometimes sleep in his car. He had the cheapest car you could buy. When I used to ride around with him, he had a Chevy, a stick shift, no radio. And I was driving with him once, and I says, "Howard, with all your money, why in the hell don't you get a Rolls Royce?" And he says, "Who do I have to impress?"
And he never had a dime in his pocket, never had any money.
He'd always borrow money. He never had any money on him. He never thought about money. It just came in, you know.
I guess that Hughes Tool Company must have just given him millions to play with.
In the mid-1950s, Las Vegas, Nevada became Howard Hughes's favorite playground. He frequented floor shows and enjoyed the company of glamorous showgirls, albeit only after securing signed contracts of silence.
He moved to Las Vegas long before he bought hotels there, because he'd worked 48 hours at a time, and then he'd go out and walk around the town. No one recognized him. And he liked it. You know, Las Vegas is a great place to be anonymous.
It was in Las Vegas that Hughes purchased one of the few houses he ever owned, affectionately named the Greenhouse.
He lived here in the 50s, the very early 50s. And of course, it was about that time that he started to turn into this tremendous recluse. And he never returned here after he left here in 1955, I believe he left. At the time that he left it, there is a large area that had monstrous, actually hotel size, air conditioners, humidifiers, because like I say, he did have this horrible fear of germs. So the house was just literally a time capsule. Clothes were still in the closets, linens, beds were still made, just like he was planning to come back. This room that we're in right now, and is now the dining room, was actually his living room, and it was very sparsely furnished, and I would say in a I call it early motel or desperate American. It was very utilitarian, nothing pretty about it. This room was his viewing room. He watched movies constantly. He slept mostly during the day, and you'll notice on the windows the heavy, heavy screening. There were a massive amount of phones when we originally came in here, approximately 50. All of them, of course, had hearing aids, boosters on them, because he was very hard of hearing.
This secluded retreat featured a small office area equipped with a memo recorder and an Edison voice writer, providing Hughes with a link to his business empire. Meanwhile, RKO Studios, under Hughes' control, experienced a significant decline, accruing losses exceeding $8 million in its initial years. Hughes, known for his staunch anti-communist stance, initiated mass layoffs at RKO, suspecting many employees of communist sympathies, including studio head Dory Sherry.
I got a call from Howard one night, and Howard said, "I've got to get rid of Dory Sherry. He's a communistic bastard, and I want him the hell out of the studio."
His anti-communist fervor was so intense that he even delivered a rare speech denouncing communism at the Hollywood American Legion Post. At his tenure at RKO, Hughes adopted the unusual practice of enticing hundreds of aspiring starlets to Hollywood with promises of fame and fortune.
That's another thing I didn't like about him. If he'd see a picture of a beautiful girl who would want to Miss America or something, he'd bring her here, do a test with her at a studio, stash her in a bungalow, and she could stay there for 10 years and the bungalows were paid for.
Sometimes he'd have 20 of them on his list, you know, set them up in apartments and give them cars to drive.
But she might never ever go back to the studio again. If they did have something, he'd give them a chance, but most of the girls were not very artistically inclined. I guess they were just beautiful girls.
They'd wait by the phone for Howard to call, and he might call once a month, you know.
After all, if he'd hear that somebody had, for instance, Terry Moore was let go at Columbia, and Howard said, "Let's bring Terry Moore in." So I signed her up at the studio. It's interesting that later on, Terry came to the executives of the estate and said that she had secretly married him on the yacht.
Terry was a strict Mormon and very religious. And when she was going with Hughes, she was one of 3 Hollywood virgins in town. Terry told me, she says, "I will not go to bed with Howard Hughes unless I'm married to him." She told him that to his face. So Howard, you know, had to skipper this yacht, marry him, and then he threw the log overboard. No record of it. But I'm sure it happened because Howard would do anything to get Terry in bed.
On December 17, 1953, Hughes established the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, although the true motivations behind this move remain a subject of debate.
He solved all of his problems by creating this tax-exempt charitable organization. And the really interesting part, of course, is that the taxpayers pick up the bill for it, because in its first or second or third years of existence, the Medical Institute, about 84% of its revenue it returns to Howard Hughes, and it spends about 1% of its revenue on actual medical research. And you go through the years, it gets something like $2 million from Hughes Aircraft Company. And in the same period of time, it pays something like $22 or $23 million to Howard Hughes as interest payments and lease payments. And so it was really the ultimate charity.
By 1955, Hughes had amassed a remarkable empire, spanning various industries and endeavors. Of special note was Hughes Aircraft, a company which was doing groundbreaking research in electronics and pioneering high-tech electronic weaponry. At his office on 7000 Romaine Street, Hughes began systematically isolating himself from business contacts through a division called Operations. This peculiar organization was masterminded by Assistant Bill Gay, a devout Mormon who recruited fellow church members to serve as operators, drivers, and personal aides to Hughes.
He had one particular section of it, which was in effect like a control panel, almost like a dispatcher's desk. You think of it as at a police department. Somebody manned it 24 hours a day, receiving calls from various parts of the empire.
And these were attorneys, as well as people with the Hughes Tool Company, vice presidents, presidents, and airline people, and on and on and on. So that would consume hours just to get everybody notified of what was going on.
This was a device by remote control that enabled him to keep various parts of his empire in check and to respond to their demands when he wanted without having to directly confront a particular need.
Despite his efforts to insulate himself from certain decisions, Hughes found himself unable to evade the repercussions of purchasing a new fleet of jets for TWA. The complex selection and financing process pushed Hughes to the brink of mental collapse. In a surprising move, Hughes parted ways with Noah Dietrich, his closest advisor of 32 years. That same year, he married Jean Peters.
There are all kinds of theories at the time that he was possibly going to be committed for some mental problems, which is one of the reasons supposedly Noah Dietrich fell out of favor. By being married, could only get the cooperation of a wife to assist in that process.
And I remember, never forget one night, she was walking out of the hotel, and I said, "Hello, Jean, how are you?" And she turned to me and she says, "Have you seen Howard lately?" Which is I thought was very strange, you know, because she was married to him at the time.
From then on, you also see a gradual mental decline in terms of those problems in his personality: fear of germs, phobias about disease and illness, an increasing desire to isolate himself from other human beings.
I found him in the garden of the Beverly Hills Hotel, wandering around, all alone, dressed. And I said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "I just came here to look around." I said, "Come in and have a drink with him." He said, "No, I'm going to pass Johnny," and that's the last time I saw Howard.
Under mounting pressure from the TWA decision, Hughes sought solace by retreating to the Bahamas, where he isolated himself in a darkened hotel suite. During this time, he planned substantial real estate investments, enlisting the help of former CIA operative Bob Mayhew, who had previously freelanced for Hughes, primarily conducting surveillance on ex-girlfriends and recruiting aspiring starlets. Before departing the Bahamas, Hughes contracted Mayhew and entrusted him with a more significant role in managing his empire.
He explained to me that he did not want to make any public appearances in the future, that he wanted me to become his alter ego. He wanted me to convince the world that when they spoke to me, they in reality were speaking to Howard Hughes.
After 6 months of exile from the TWA ordeal, Hughes returned to Los Angeles and took up residence in the Beverly Hills Hotel. There, he began orchestrating a peculiar world within his rented bungalow. Although his room was cluttered with debris, he declared it a germ-free zone, and his staff of personal aides followed very precise methods while attending to Hughes.
For example, if you're going to open a can of food, you have to cover your hands with tissue paper. When you take the can opener to open, the bowl that the food goes into must be cleaned vigorously before that happens. When you open a car door for him to get into, you must hold the tissues over the car door.
His Romaine Street staff prepared a thick procedures manual for those working closely with Hughes.
Step number 3, washing of can. He should first soak and remove the label, and then brush the cylindrical part of the can over and over until all particles of dust, pieces of paper, and in general, all sources of contamination have been removed.
He wanted the drapes closed so people couldn't look in from outside. And at that particular time, he had me instruct the people to dip rags in alcohol and wipe all the doorknobs, so there'd be no germs on all the doorknobs.
And they had to be sanitized, so to speak. In other words, the windows had to be closed, they had to be scotch taped down and so on, etc., etc.
He wouldn't shake hands with people and didn't want people touching him.
I think we bought up all the cosmetic gloves in Beverly Hills. I don't see how they could make any more movies till they ordered some more cosmetic gloves. You're supposed to keep them on all the time. Little white gloves.
It is equally important to me that nobody ever opens any door or opening to any room, cabinet, or closet, or anything used to store any of my things, even for 1,000th of an inch, for 1,000th of a second. I don't want the possibility of dust or insects or anything of that nature entering.
Open the door as little as you can and get in before the bugs and everything gets in, and then close it again quickly. That's all.
Hughes rarely bathed and went naked with increasing frequency. He spent a great deal of his time cleaning anything within reach with his endless supply of Kleenex. He stopped screening films at the studio and instead had been delivered to the bungalow. His drug use had increased, and a constant stream of messengers hand-delivered bottles of codeine to the Hughes staff. When lonely, he would often call for an aide to sit silently in the bungalow.
Well, he was sitting at his table over on there, and there's 2 other chairs in the room, and he, for some reason, just said, "Chuck, that's your chair." So every time I went in there, I would sit in that same goddamn chair. And we didn't talk to him. He talked to you. He said, "Chuck, yeah, what time is it?" So we were there at different hours, back and forth. So I would get up to go over and show him my watch. And then I'd start to say, "It's 3:30, Mr. Hughes." Shh, don't say a thing. You didn't tell him what it was. You put your watch in front of him and let him decide what time it was.
Howard Hughes built his own prison, and he made sure that you couldn't escape from it. He did it himself. He just had these aides surround him, and if you needed to talk to Hughes, you didn't talk to him.
And what's sad is that most of those around him at the time were completely catering to this phobia. There wasn't one person around him who said, "Howard, this is crazy, this is silly, these things aren't going to bother you." I mean, they treated this seriously, like this was a matter of national security.
When his fear of germs subsided, Hughes was able to lapse into periods of clear thought. During one of these secluded periods, Hughes successfully negotiated financing for the fleet of TWA jets.
The way he worked out the financing was not acceptable in some ways to the TWA president and the executives of TWA. It wasn't too long after that when Hughes, for various reasons, sold all of his TWA stock at a figure which was about 86 per share, higher than it had ever, almost higher than it had ever been.
Well, the check was for $546,549,771.00,
which I believe was probably the largest business check ever written in the United States.
That was a fair piece of change. Yes, a fair piece of change.
Advised to leave California to avoid hefty taxes on his newfound windfall, Hughes made an uncharacteristic move by traveling by train, first to Boston and then onward to Las Vegas. Under the guidance of Bob Mayhew, Hughes was discreetly ushered into the Desert Inn through a service entrance, where he and his aides settled into suites on the penthouse floor. Hughes would remain in a near-constant isolation there for the next 4 years. His prolonged stay eventually led to tensions with the Desert Inn's owners, who sought to reclaim control of their lucrative high roller suites.
Came a time later where They had given an instruction to the security guards that if Hughes was not vacated in 48 hours, that they would bodily come up to the 9th floor and kick him out of the hotel.
They were very unhappy when Hughes didn't want to leave, so it ended up that we started negotiations and finally made the deal in March to acquire the hotel.
Now, in other words, he bought the hotel because he needed a place to sleep.
However, during negotiations, Hughes' tax attorney presented a solution. Casino receipts could be classified as active income, resolving his tax predicament.
He was in ecstasy. He called me and he said, imagine, this is money from heaven. Are there any more of these joints available?
And so after that, we started to buy more hotels. He got excited about it and had all this cash laying around, so to speak.
About that time, he made up his mind that he wanted to be the biggest in the gaming business.
Empowered by this revelation, Hughes embarked on a spending spree, acquiring ownership of the Desert Inn, Sands, Castaways, Frontier, Silver Slipper, and Landmark casinos.
Las Vegas at that time had that image of being the center of organized crime, that organized crime was very deeply involved in it.
And Mr. Hughes came in and purchased those casinos that the state felt they were having trouble with, and he was very welcome in that regard.
He shifted the emphasis, the public emphasis from Las Vegas, the organized crime people, to Las Vegas, the billionaire industrialist.
The state of Nevada granted exceptions for its most renowned citizen.
Historically, everyone who asks for a Nevada gambling license has to personally appear before the Gaming Control Board or Gaming Commission.
And in each case, he refused to make an appearance. He refused to furnish fingerprints, contemporary photos, or financials.
That was one of my responsibilities as well, incidentally, to convince the state gaming licensing authorities not to require his personal appearance. So they adopted what they call the Hughes rule.
Hughes was not content with being the biggest in the gaming industry. He also sought to influence governments citywide and statewide.
Mr. Hughes wanted to have a summary of every bill introduced in the Nevada legislature, and he wanted me to pass on his comments to the legislators, which I did. He had an insatiable appetite to want his views to be known and be accepted as far as certain legislation was concerned. He's a very bright human being. Most of the things he requested me to do, and Mr. Mayhew to do, not all of them, but most of them, were good recommendations. Some of them we couldn't carry out.
From his penthouse perch, Hughes issued a challenging request: halt the construction of the International Hotel. His rationale? Hughes believed that owner Kirk Kerkorian was stealing his spotlight.
It was almost funny. I mean, when he gave me the assignment to try to dissuade Kerkorian from building the big International, I could not succeed because Kirk had made up his mind that that's what he was going to do.
And we said, okay, we'll go ahead, but we really couldn't do it, and we really didn't try, because it was an embarrassing situation to try and stop another hotel from being built.
He had me talk to Kirk on on many instances, trying to discourage him because of the underground testing, that all the high-rise hotels would collapse, and Kirk just went about his business. And although he was always very friendly to Mr. Hughes, but he didn't pay a damn bit of attention to what we had to say.
Showcasing his irrational thought process and its detrimental impact to his own hotel's profitability.
The Tournament of Champions was at the Desert Inn. It was a regular annual golf tournament that brought in the best pros and a lot of stars and a lot of tourists. And Hughes canceled the Tournament of Champions.
And to think that you would take this kind of an asset and just say, we'll turn it over gratis to someone else if they'll take us off the hook, was incomprehensible to me. yes, it bothered me. And of course, the fact that his reason was that it would create too many germs bothered me even more.
Obsessed with control, Hughes seemed to envision dominion over the entirety of Nevada. From his darkened penthouse, he meticulously charted maps outlining his latest acquisitions, including vast stretches of underdeveloped land, the North Las Vegas airport, numerous mining claims, and a television station acquired not only for investment, but also for his personal amusement.
He wanted to watch the movies that he wanted to watch on television. He was watching a lot of television. And so I think maybe that was the motivation for buying that station.
Howard Hughes would watch the movies all night long, and as a general rule, he would have an aide call the next day complaining about the movie that ran last night. And this was almost an everyday occurrence. It would happen a lot.
He was the one that decided what movies were going to be shown, what was available, and get this movie from California. And so it ended up that whatever movie was scheduled, if he didn't want to run that, he'd say, I want to see this.
While he was wide awake for hours watching films broadcast by his TV station, Bob Mayhew assumed an increasingly influential role within the Hughes empire. Mayhew held the title of head of Hughes Nevada operations.
And consequently, we began using the Romaine Street office in Hollywood less and less.
He very strongly told me, upon his arrival in Las Vegas, that not only did he want a complete severance from the group at 7000 Romaine, which was Bill Gay and his associates, but he didn't want any of them to even come to Las Vegas.
And there was a power play going on between Bill Gay, Chester Davis, and Bob Mayhew. They were getting shunted farther aside, and Mayhew was coming up in the ranks.
Bill Gay, Frank William Gay, his real name, but everybody called him Bill. Bill formulated his power, if that's the correct word, power. He formulated his authority in that he controlled the aides who surrounded Howard Hughes.
The aides really became his family, and they supplied his food. They gave him the drugs he took every day, whether it was the Valium or codeine or whatever. They were his whole life support system.
Nobody had direct access to Hughes. The aides had direct access to Hughes, and Bill Gay had direct access to the aides. So if you wanted to talk to Hughes, you had to talk to Bill, and Bill in turn had to talk to the aides.
Unaware of the internal machinations within his empire, Hughes remained fixated on television. It was while engrossed in a program that Hughes stumbled upon news of a new round of atomic testing planned for Nevada, sending him into a state of paralyzing fear. He knew that, unlike the germs that he fought to shield himself from, radiation could not be prevented from entering his carefully guarded environment. He declared war on the Atomic Energy Commission and pledged unlimited resources in stopping the tests.
That's one of the reasons he established that power in Nevada. He was, trying to pull a lot of political strings to get that atomic testing stopped.
I recall a particular test called, it was codenamed Boxcar. And it was a large underground nuclear test. I think they were figuring it was about equal to about 1 million tons of TNT, megaton. And Hughes absolutely wanted that thing stopped.
He bent every effort humanly possible to stop the tests in Nevada at the test site, but we were unsuccessful in that regard. And we had to stop pushing too hard because it was becoming embarrassing.
I remember numerous briefings with the Department of Energy prior to the Boxcar detonation. And I know that the reason that occurred was on the other side of the street. The Hughes people are saying, you can't do this, you've got to stop this.
These were genuine concerns, and he wrote memo after memo on these subjects in trying to get the test stopped.
I say Nevada is no longer so desperate for mere existence that it has to accept and swallow with a smile poisonous, contaminated radioactive waste material more horrible than human excrement.
Unable to prevent the boxcar test, Hughes intensified his efforts to influence the upcoming presidential election, seeking support from any candidate who would succeed outgoing President Lyndon Johnson.
To put all this in true perspective, what happened is that Hughes made a decision on the same day, wrote me a memo telling me that he wanted me to see Richard Nixon as soon as possible and offer him unlimited help with his campaign because it was very important that he, Richard Nixon, be the next president of the United States. The same day, he sent me another memo saying to go see Hubert Humphrey and offer him unlimited support because it was very important that he be the next president of the United States.
Despite this, he also tried a last-ditch effort to appeal to President Johnson himself.
Well, on 2 occasions, he wanted me to offer $1 million to then presidents to try to stop the underground testing. And by that time, I had reached a point in my world with him where I knew that I had to give him the impression that I was doing it for fear that he'd give the assignment to someone who'd be stupid enough to try.
By 1970, Hughes' health was visibly deteriorating. Logs maintained his aides revealed his increasing reliance on narcotics, including both oral and injectable forms of codeine, as well as massive doses of Valium, which Hughes referred to as blue bombers. This drug dependency led to chronic constipation, necessitating frequent enemas. Hughes even insisted on preserving his urine in jars stored in the closet of his penthouse. With his health failing, Hughes slept more and ate less. His kidneys suffered from the effects of his 2-decade-long addiction to codeine. Meanwhile, his marriage to Jean Peters had deteriorated to the point where she had not seen him in over 3.5 years, prompting her to file for divorce. In the midst of these personal struggles, another battle emerged between Bob Mayhew and Hughes' personal aides, who were tightening their grip on Hughes' affairs.
I began to get the impression that some of my memos were not getting through to him.
As probably where Mayhew may have misjudged is that they still controlled the flow of information. And that was the ultimate test. They determined, what information got to Hughes and whether Mayhew's information got to Hughes. And that was very critical, absolutely.
Communication shut down. Nobody could communicate. I had some very important things I had to communicate through Mayhew, through Bob Mayhew, and Mayhew had no communication with him. He just shut us down. And you obviously sensed something wrong in that situation.
I think Mayhew was an empire builder, and I think he enjoyed the power and the position that he had in representing Hughes's interests. But I think he allocated to himself certain powers and privileges that were a little excessive.
I think jealousy, envy, and the fact that it looked like Mayhew was building his own empire within the Hughes empire that caused the demise of Bob Mayhew.
There's no doubt in my mind that they convinced him that I, in fact, had stolen money from him. And it breaks my heart to think that Howard Hughes died without knowing the difference.
On November 13, 1970, a proxy came over the telecopier in the deserting penthouse. It finalized an action that had been in the planning stages for months. Upon obtaining Hughes's signature, the proxy effectively transferred control of Hughes Nevada Holdings to executive Bill Gay and Chester Davis, a key WA attorney closely associated with the Hughes. On November 25, 1970, the Desert Inn penthouse was empty.
They took this man out of here Thanksgiving Eve. It was a very cold night, when his doctor had told me 2 days earlier that he was so sick that he would not move him from the Desert Inn to Sunrise Hospital, which is not a mile away, unless it were a dire emergency.
Well, he clearly was not in good physical shape when he left the Desert Inn. I mean, you're looking now at someone who is consuming large quantities of Valium, codeine, other drugs.
Interestingly, it was later revealed that despite Hughes's critical illness, the quantities of codeine and Valium made available to him and apparently consumed by him in the weeks leading up to the proxy's acquisition, reached some of the highest levels in his life.
They took this man on this night, waltzed him down 9 flights of exterior fire escape, and brought him to Nellis Airport and flew him to the Bahamas.
The contact that law enforcement and that media and that the public had as far as Hughes was Bob Mayhew. And Bob Mayhew sincerely believed that Hughes was forced to leave here against his will.
But there was some confusion as to who was a leader, who was in power, who should the political people listen to.
I began getting calls from the casino managers saying the people were moving into the cages. I called the governor. I said, has this been cleared with you? No. I called the Gaming Control Board. Has this been cleared with you? No. Called the Gaming Commission? No.
Mayhew was saying, I'm in charge. Holliday, Davis, and Gay were saying, no, we're in charge. And it was like a war. It was going on. One camp was headquartered at the Sands. Another camp was headquartered at the Frontier.
That confusion lasted for several months until it finally, the papers were sent in, powers of attorney were sent in to the government officials, placing Chester Davis and others in charge. So that was sufficient for them to feel comfortable that Mayhew was out and the new people were in.
I was sick. But then I realized that the battle was over. I mean, I realized that somehow, whatever they had done, they had convinced him that I was on the wrong side of the fence.
In early December, Hughes retreated to a penthouse at the Britannia Beach Hotel on Paradise Island, seeking respite from the troubles that plagued him in Las Vegas. Little did he know that a man he had never met would soon become a significant problem: Clifford Irving. Irving, an author with 8 books to his name, including the popular Fake, which centered on art forgeries, embarked on a far more audacious scheme in 1971. He claimed to be collaborating with Hughes on an autobiography and forged letters purportedly written by Hughes to substantiate his claim. Convinced by the forged documents, the McGraw-Hill Publishing Company advanced Irving $100,000 for the publishing rights. Despite denials of authenticity from the Hughes Tool Company, there was no feasible way to bring Hughes out of isolation to refute the claims. Irving seemingly crafted the perfect scam, for no one had seen Hughes for over a decade, and many questioned his very existence.
Then it got to be of concern to, I don't know whether it was probably government officials as well as the public. Does Howard Hughes exist? Is he alive?
There was a very serious thought in the public and among many people who were in areas of authority that thought he was probably dead. And these people were merely speaking for him.
In an attempt to placate nervous Nevada gaming officials, Hughes placed a call to former Governor Paul Laxalt. Hughes's mental condition at the time seems questionable, given the memo that was passed to him before the call was placed.
Your conversation should be exactly as the script was outlined to you. Make it most emphatic, with no discussion as to why, just a confirmation. However, it would be a good idea to mention your loss of confidence in Mayhew. And you could end by emphasizing your intention to return to Las Vegas after your business trip.
One of them said to me, they said, wait a minute, you know, he talked on the phone to your predecessor, and, you know, he was satisfied. Well, I said, I'm not my predecessor. I like my predecessor, Paul Laxalt, but I can't tell on the phone whether this is Howard Hughes or not.
In an effort to dispel confusion surrounding the Clifford Irving hoax, it was arranged for Hughes to address a group of reporters via telephone, a group who had known him before his reclusive years.
Hughes called me up from the Britannia Beach Hotel in the Bahamas the day before, and he says, I'm going to come out and expose Clifford Irving as a big hoax. And he said, I'm going to have a press conference, which I'll talk on phone. He says, I want you on it. We assembled in this room, and all the other reporters, you know, asked all kinds of trick questions. Make sure it was Howard Hughes and not Richard Little. And of course, when it came my turn, I said, I know that voice anywhere. He said, you know, I've heard it too many times. It's etched in my memory.
When questioned about Clifford Irving, Hughes simply responded with, "I don't know him." However, reporters took the opportunity to probe further, delving into more personal matters.
Someone asked him about his report he had fingernails 10 inches long. And, he laughed about it. He says, how in the hell could I write my name?
And all the correspondents chuckle at it as well, like these stories are exaggerated. But the stories weren't exaggerated. He was just that loony at the time. But what is intriguing about him is that he knew the outside world would frown on him if they knew he was that way.
And I, at that time, made a remark that as far as I was concerned, there's nothing but a big circus. They said, oh yeah, that's his voice. Well, what's the big deal? Why don't we just see this voice? If everything is fine? And so we had some doubts on whether or not he was really in control of his company.
Over the next 7 months, Hughes and his aides embarked on a global journey to evade corporate lawsuits and the relentless pursuit of photographers aiming to capture a glimpse of the elusive billionaire. At each destination, Hughes retreated to the familiar sanctuary of a darkened hotel suite. Constantly medicated, Hughes spent most of his waking hours engrossed in films projected on a screen at the foot of his bed. Unaware of the ongoing TWA lawsuit, he was in no state to fight, even as executives urged him to sell his namesake, the Hughes Tool Division.
TWA ultimately sued Hughes and was awarded a substantial judgment. And Hughes Tool Company, which had provided all the money through the years to fund all of Howard's various enterprises, from the filmmaking to the airplanes to everything, Howard gets enormous pressure to sell it. And this is at a time when he's really totally isolated under the control of basically the people who are around him every day.
But I'm sure he had long-standing feelings of closeness, and he probably had some regret in having to let it go.
He lost roughly $1/3 billion as a result of that sale. It was probably one of the worst business decisions ever made. In the 5 years after he sold that company, he had made more than he received for it, which was something like $150 million. And this is one of the times you see the really tragic side of Hughes's life, because he's convinced he has to sell it. He sells it. The judgment, of course, is later overturned. He really didn't have to.
One person who gained from the sale was Bill Gay, who now became executive vice president.
Was supposedly based on word from on high. It wasn't until after Hughes' death that we began to wonder if anybody ever did, if Hughes ever did make those pronouncements.
The new executive committee opted to consolidate the remaining Hughes Nevada holdings under an umbrella corporation.
The new company that is created for the remainder of his holdings is called Summa Corporation. And when he first sees the name, he doesn't even understand what it is.
If you stop and consider all of the companies that Hughes owned prior to Summa were all Hughes. There was Hughes Aircraft, Hughes Helicopters, Hughes this, Hughes Oil Company, Hughes Tool Company, Hughes whatever it was, had Hughes in the name. Summa suddenly became the first company that didn't have a Hughes name on it, Summa.
It's one of those really sad points when you realize here is the business that provided the basis for everything that he did is gone. In his surviving business, he doesn't even know what the name means.
In March of 1973, Hughes relocated once more, this time to the Inn on the Park Hotel in London. There, he briefly emerged from his self-imposed isolation to agree to a face-to-face meeting with Governor O'Callaghan.
We went up late at night, it's after midnight, to meet with him. And they brought him in, he walked in, and we shook hands, and we sat down, and I asked the questions that had to be asked to make sure that we had the right person. Here's a man who was alive. It was his money, and he wanted to do this with his money, and that's fine.
He had to find someplace where a now deteriorating individual whose health was deteriorating could, in fact, live easily. His last port of call, of course, was Mexico.
During this period, Hughes was informed that he had been moved to Acapulco under the guise of a lack of available drugs in Freeport. However, the reality was that drugs were being supplied by a pharmaceutical company based in New York.
He is no longer probably mentally in control, of his complete faculties. It would certainly appear that way when you're looking at the memos he's writing, when you're looking at all the drugs he's consuming.
I'm not so sure the new people that came on board thought about protecting him at all. They may have thought only about themselves and how they could enhance their own lives.
You also saw this by virtue of the fact that the people were, back in those days, trying to get him to, where's your will? Get the will all in shape. There was a lot of concern.
Hughes never gave anything of the company away. He never gave anything of the company away. So everybody was trying to get a secure position.
Some of those aides at that time were making $75,000 a year for delivering messages, taking telephone calls. That may not seem like a lot of money today, but if you go back in time, in that year, median family income, meaning the average family in the U.S. was earning $12,000. So if you were looking at that today, you would be paying these people to do these errand jobs almost $250,000.
I can go down that whole list. If I were in the headhunting business, I don't know where I'd start to find any one of them a $10,000 job.
The final days of Howard Hughes stood in stark contrast to the image of the man who once wielded such formidable control over his life. Hughes had become so weakened that he could no longer summon the strength to inject himself with codeine.
There was a story on the wire about a doctor in Mexico that had examined Hughes, and he was the first indication that I read, this is prior to many books that were published, that Hughes was definitely in very poor physical condition when he got to him.
He's got bed sores all over him. He's got a gaping sore on his head, bruises, and although the doctor doesn't see this, he's got broken hypodermic needles in his arm.
And it wasn't the kind of physical condition that had just developed during a week or so of illness. It was the kind of physical condition that apparently developed over many years of either a lifestyle or neglect.
The doctor's just looking at him physically and saying, why isn't this man in a hospital? And that's really a sad picture of a person who has deteriorated to that point, and no one really seems to care.
And it's not the Howard Hughes that I knew. He was helpless, really helpless.
Probably the most striking thing is this picture of a man who basically is all alone.
While there are the aides around him and people who have been around him for a long period of time, there isn't what you would call anybody really close to him.
I hate to think so, but I think he probably was very sad at the end. He had no more TWA, no more spruce goose, no more studio. He just had a lot of money.
On April 5th, 1976, Hughes slipped into a coma. His body lay still, except for tremors in the muscles of his face. Hughes' personal physician was summoned to the penthouse, but upon arrival, instead of promptly attending to the comatose Hughes, he spent nearly 2 hours rummaging through the files kept in the suite.
He began shredding documents that were in the hotel. And I have a feeling that there was a lot of this going on throughout the Hughes organization in those last days, that a lot of documents were being destroyed. And the question always is, what were they and why?
4 hours later, Howard Hughes was transported by air ambulance to Houston, Texas.
Had a beard, long, scraggly type hair, gray hair, and just a very shriveled up type of appearance, like he'd lost a lot of weight.
He looked almost dead when he boarded the airplane, if his eyes were wide open, and there was really very little life at all, if any, left in him. He was alive, though, because I did notice his mouth moved just a little bit once or twice.
As we were taxiing into the customs ramp, the doctor in the back said, just take your time, there's no need to hurry any longer. That's how we knew at that time. He died apparently as we were descending into Houston, just as we were coming in, approaching the airport.
The preliminary autopsy findings demonstrated that Mr. Hughes died of chronic renal disease.
One of the interesting things on that original autopsy was that the report said that he had a very minimal amount of codeine in his body, and it was amount basically commensurate with anyone taking a therapeutic dose of codeine. It's something, a dose that's recommended. But what you see is that the volume he had in his body, that people in the past had died from such volumes. We did the story that he had a potentially lethal dose of codeine in his body, and up until that point that hadn't been reported.
Additionally, concealed in the original autopsy reports were X-rays revealing the remnants of hypodermic needles that had broken off in both of Hughes' arms.
I think you look at the man's physical condition when he arrives in Houston aboard the plane, and I think anybody has to ask the question, how does someone get in this condition?
Can you imagine a man with 7 broken hypodermic needles in his arm? A man who's responsible for having built the biggest medical foundation in the history of man? Having a sore that oozes, a bone that's sticking out of his shoulder?
This is not the picture of someone who is being really cared for. And the question is why?
I've often said that people have asked me, do you think they killed this man? And my answer is a very, I believe, fair one. If sheer negligence qualifies as a weapon, yes, they did.
In the annals of modern aviation, certain silhouettes demand our utmost reverence. Before you stands a leviathan of the skies, the mighty Hughes H-4 Hercules. A staggering proposition born of wartime necessity, designed to bypass the menace of ocean submarines. Look closely at the men dwarfed by its prow. This is an ocean liner granted the gift of flight. The public affectionately, and perhaps mistakenly, dubbed her the Spruce Goose. Yet the truth is far more fascinating. She is a marvel of birch, not spruce. Crafted using the revolutionary Duramold process, thin veneers of wood were married together with synthetic resins under immense heat and pressure. The result? A material stronger than aluminum, capable of bearing loads that defied the imaginations of the day. To birth such a giant, an entirely new environment had to be forged. The immense assembly building in Culver City was essentially a giant humidor. Temperature and humidity were strictly controlled 24 hours a day, an absolute necessity to ensure the wood adhesives cured with perfect, unyielding strength. Through the haze of industry, you witness the quiet determination of men who treated aviation construction with the delicate precision of master cabinet makers. High above the factory floor, shipwrights and aeronautical engineers toiled together on the flight deck structure. Consider the sheer physical forces at play. The control surfaces of the H-4 were so massive that no human pilot possessed the sheer strength to move them manually. Thus, an unprecedented hydraulic-pneumatic control system was engineered, multiplying the pilot's effort by a factor of 200, ensuring this giant could be flown with the ease of a fighter pursuit plane. Stepping into the belly of the beast is akin to walking through the rib cage of a prehistoric whale. Notice the impeccable geometry of the frames. This cavernous cargo deck was engineered with a singular, staggering purpose: to transport 750 fully equipped infantrymen, or, if the need arose, 2 30-ton M4 Sherman tanks directly across the Atlantic. Here, the nerve center of the Hercules. The Flight Engineers Station boasts an array of instrumentation unparalleled in heavy transport. With 8 massive radial engines to monitor, the panel required a dedicated crew member just to balance the lifeblood of fuel and oil flowing through the ship's sprawling veins. As we cast our eyes over the wings, the sheer, unbroken expanse of birch is staggering. The wingspan stretches an astonishing 320 feet. Inside those wings, the crawl spaces are large enough for a man to stand upright, allowing mechanics to service the massive Pratt & Whitney engines in mid-flight. The tail alone rises into the rafters, taller than a 5-story building. The H-4 Hercules stands as a monument to a time when constraints were merely invitations to invent. A magnificent marriage of timber and tenacity, proving that human ingenuity recognizes no absolute boundaries.
As Britain and the Allies struggled for survival in a fierce battle with the Nazis, American industrial might was mobilized to supply them with the weapons and machines to beat back the German onslaught. Millionaire Howard Hughes was anxious to participate in the war effort to do his part to defeat Hitler. His intentions were not completely altruistic. A military contract would also have been extremely profitable. Hughes built the prototype D-2, a speedy wooden fighter/bomber, entirely with his own money and in secret. He hoped to amaze the U.S. Army Air Force with it, but the plane was flatly rejected. Fortunately for Hughes, he had friends in high places. When President Roosevelt declared war on December 8, 1941, he had not only to consider the fate of the free world and the lives of millions of American soldiers, he also had to weigh the risks to his own sons. Elliott Roosevelt was a member of the U.S. Army Air Force. He had received his captain's commission on his 30th birthday in 1940. At the time, Roosevelt was battling for a third term in office, and there were cries of nepotism. But General Henry Hap Arnold, chief of the Air Corps, silenced those rumors. Elliott Roosevelt's poor eyesight left him classified as 4F, or unfit to fly, but he still managed to carve out a respectable career, participating in 89 combat missions. Reconnaissance was his specialty, and he was considered the leading expert in recon in the European theater, and a pioneer in aerial night photography. While commanding the 3rd Reconnaissance Group in Operation Torch, the invasion of North Africa, Roosevelt had a chance to fly on board a speedy de Havilland Mosquito. He was so impressed with de Havilland's wooden wonder, he became a passionate advocate of British aircraft and believed American-made B-17s and P-38s were sitting ducks against the German defenses. His enthusiasm may have blinded him when a sly Howard Hughes presented him with a prototype for his own wooden aircraft, the D-2. The D-2 was a twin-boom fighter just like the Vultee Swoosh Goose, designed by Hughes' former employee Richard Palmer. Palmer left Hughes for Vultee because he was tired of the company's lack of focus. The D-2 also had a remarkable resemblance to the P-38 Lightning. They were so similar, Hughes did not believe it was a coincidence, and he testified to the Senate that Lockheed had stolen his design. Though the D-2 had been rejected by the U.S. Army Air Force, when Colonel Elliott Roosevelt came to town looking for a new reconnaissance plane, Hughes dazzled him Hollywood-style to salvage a contract. The P-38 Lightning had been the workhorse reconnaissance plane for the U.S. Army Air Force, but by 1943, they were looking for an upgrade. Colonel Roosevelt, an expert in recon, was asked to explore what aircraft were in the works that might take over for the P-38. Hughes spared no expense when Roosevelt came to see his plant in Culver City, California. A line of limousines greeted the president's son and his staff at the airport, and they were taken on the trip of their lives. Women and starlets were thrown at them. They were treated to Hollywood's most extravagant parties in the hottest nightclubs. A married Roosevelt was introduced to his next wife, Faye Emerson, an up-and-coming actress with whom he would have a scandalous affair. In the midst of all this partying, there was time to see the D-2. Its Duramold body, a type of plywood bonded with plastic and molded under heat and pressure, would certainly have impressed Roosevelt, who was enamored with a Mosquito. By the time Colonel Roosevelt left California, he was sold on the D-2. He became an enthusiastic salesman for Hughes when he briefed General Arnold and his father on the project.
If we need to lay out work.
Arnold was in a difficult position, as Material Command had already rejected the aircraft. They did not believe Hughes had the facilities or track record to deliver on an order. In the end, Arnold had no choice but to listen to the president's son. He ordered the XF-11, an all-metal and larger reconnaissance version of the D-2. The decision caused an uproar in the Army Air Force, not only because the D-2 had been rejected, but also because they already had a similar plane in development, the Lockheed Chain Lightning. The XP-58 was a long-range heavy fighter which could outperform the D-2, and it came from a known and reliable aircraft and manufacturer, the P-38 Lightning, built by Lockheed. Uproar or not, Elliott had his father's ear. Hughes won a $43 million contract to build 100 XF-11s, a contract that would be worth $500 million today. Unfortunately for the Army Air Force, their worst fears about Hughes came to be. Work progressed slowly on the XF-11. Each of its Pratt & Whitney 28-cylinder radial engines drove a pair of contra-rotating four-bladed controllable pitch propellers. It was hoped this style of prop would increase performance and stability, but the whole system was too complex and ultimately scrapped. As years passed, the XF-11 project, forced on the U.S. Army Air Force, became increasingly unpopular. The original D-2 prototype was mysteriously destroyed in a fire in November of 1944. At the time, Hughes and the U.S. Army Air Force were fighting over who should pay for the original development costs. With the prototype a pile of ash, the two sides agreed to split the costs. It was an accident which was highly convenient for the millionaire. Like the XF-11, controversy followed Colonel Roosevelt as the war progressed. Project Aphrodite was a joint mission between the U.S. Navy and U.S. Army Air Force to destroy heavily fortified German submarine pens and V-2 sites with bomber drones. The pilot and co-pilot would take aircraft heavily loaded with explosives to altitude before parachuting to safety. A mothership remotely controlled the bombers the rest of the way via radio. In later years, Elliott Roosevelt claimed to be in the Mosquito chase plane that recorded the tragic death of Lieutenant Joe Kennedy Jr., brother of future President John F. Kennedy. His plane inexplicably detonated before it reached its target. Elliott asserted that he actually flew through the deadly fireball that ensued, but there is no record of the president's son participating in the mission. There was also some controversy when Roosevelt was finally awarded his wings. General Arnold, who had been forced to accept Hughes' XF-11, also had his arm twisted to intervene in Colonel Roosevelt's final promotion. In January of 1945, Arnold ordered General Carl Spaatz to appoint Elliott, whose poor vision had left him classified as 4F, or unfit to fly, as a rated pilot. The president then submitted his son's name to the Senate for promotion to brigadier general. On April 12, 1945, America mourned the death of President Roosevelt. He had accomplished much during his tenure, guiding them out of the Depression and through the war. As tragic as his passing was, it did untie the hands of General Arnold. He was finally able to put millionaire Howard Hughes in his place. The XF-11 order was canceled a month after the president's death on May 11, 1945, though Hughes was allowed to continue to work on the prototypes. By the time the war ended, Hughes still had little to show for all the money spent on the XF-11. It would be another year before a prototype would fly, and the first flight ended in a crash that nearly killed him. The XF-11 was not Hughes's only multi-million-dollar scandal. His behemoth transport, the H-4 Spruce Goose, was more of a lame duck and was yet to fly. With millions of dollars poured into both projects, questions swirled in the Senate about what Hughes was doing with the money. In 1947, the Brewster Committee looked into the spending irregularities surrounding these projects.
I've put the sweat of my life into this thing. I have my reputation rolled up in it, and I have stated several times that if it's a failure, I'll probably leave this country and never come back, and I mean it.
Elliott Roosevelt and Johnny Myers were also called as witnesses. Myers, a publicist who worked for Hughes, gave a detailed expense report of all the perks Roosevelt had received during his time in California.
Well, now, can you tell me why you were charging up to aircraft production $132 for a nylon hose for Miss Emerson?
Because she'd been very charming. Just like the presidents up higher. The girls were very pleasant.
What has that got to do with aircraft production?
They just went along. Every company in the business did it. We're no different.
Well, but is it... You say because she was very charming, that's the reason that you charged up $132.
That's right.
For the which would go into the production of airplanes.
That's right.
And now, will you tell us why you gave her $20 and charged it up to the company to go home if she was very charming?
Well, you tapped me.
Myers had even paid for Roosevelt's wedding to Faye Emerson. In his defense, Roosevelt claimed that he first heard about the XF-11 after the Culver City visit in a briefing from Arnold.
And there are efforts to find out whether there was any connection that I might have had with the chief executive, which might have had an effect on any war contracts. And I'm here to give you the complete facts. It is undoubtedly true that he bought some tickets to from New York to Washington. But I still want you to put the question to him, was he completely positive that one of those tickets was for Elliott Roosevelt?
Well, I'll put it right to him now. Mr. Myers, what do you say? Look at that sheet. You told us about them being lost and buying the fares back. Now, what do you say about it?
That's what it says here. It says Colonel Elliott Roosevelt Party.
Yeah.
So I didn't testify that he was one of them. He could have been one of the other fellas. Did I say that under the word Elliott Roosevelt Party? What?
During a break in hearings, Hughes decided to give the Senate all the evidence they needed that the Spruce Goose was fit to fly. While taxi testing the aircraft, he took the H-4 on its first and only flight. In daredevil fashion, Hughes proved to the cameras and reporters that the millions of American tax dollars had not been squandered or misappropriated. The millionaire used his Hollywood dazzle to save his own skin.
Every aircraft has a story that deserves to be told. Don't let these legends fade into the past. Like this video and subscribe to our channel and help us keep aviation history alive.
In the annals of modern aviation, certain silhouettes demand our utmost reverence. Before you stands a leviathan of the skies, the mighty Hughes H-4 Hercules. A staggering proposition born of wartime necessity designed to bypass the menace of ocean submarines. Look closely at the men dwarfed by its prow. This is an ocean liner granted the gift of flight.
He was one of the richest men. He owned a studio. The girls were flocking to him.
He was eccentric, there's no question about it. He wasn't crazy.
He may have been strange in that he had so damn much money.
He probably made the greatest aviation picture ever made, Hell's Angels.
Plane